Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 14th of April. I welcome you all to the Vetiva breakfast meeting brought to you by Vetiva Capital Management in partnership with Frontier Africa Report. I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and may be shared with third parties, as well as being broadcast live on Facebook. Presentation is scheduled to hold for 30 minutes, inclusive of Q&A. However, if due to time constraints we are unable to answer all of the questions, kindly forward them to research@vetiva.com. Today, we'll be hearing from our equity and fixed income traders and from our partner, Frontier Africa Report. I'll start with Sean, our equity trader on the West African market. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Joshua, and good morning, everyone. Starting off with a review of the performance of the Ghana Stock Exchange, the composite index closed flat with no gainers and losers in this session. We saw Cowbank and MTN leading the activity charts with 8.2 million and 102,000 units of shares respectively exchanging hands in those two names. We saw activity level improve significantly with 511% and 307% increase in volume and value traded. Overall in the market, year-to-date still remains 18.53%, as we saw only 6 stocks recording activity in the session. So though it was a quiet session, but we saw MTN and Cowbank decent. We saw decent activity in those two names. Moving to BRVM, which also recorded decent improvement in activity level with 191% and 84% improvement in volume. In volume and value traded, it was a generally positive session as we saw 19 gainers and just 6 losers as the market moved back into the positive territory with a 48 bips gain following the previous day loss in that market. Yesterday's game moderated the year-to-date loss to 2.84% in that market. And like we've previously mentioned, that this week we'll likely see mixed sessions, few days of gains and then other days of losses. So we're just going to be seeing that play out till the end of the week. So moving to Nigeria, the Nigerian market completed a day of increase in market activity across the markets in West Africa, with a significant jump of also 113% in turnover, as total value traded was 2.9 billion in the session. However, the improved activity did not translate to a positive close for the ASI, which lost 29 bips to settle at 38,601 points. We saw loss of 238 bips in MTN, which couldn't sustain previous day's gain, as well as losses in Guinness and Julius Berger ensured that the index had a downward close. Stanbic, FBN, NARCO were some of the gainers in the session, but they all couldn't push the market to a positive close. The banking sector dominated the session with about 45% of turnover, as well as we saw Dangote Cement, which also recorded decent turnover with crosses carried out in the name. Banking subsector once again closed positive on the back of gains in Stanbic, FBN, Fidelity, and Sterling. After multiple sessions of losses we saw last week. So to an extent, investors just continue to cherry pick names in that sector after we saw some couple of days of losses last week in the banks. Insurance sector also closed up, while others ended lower. Consumer goods sector continued to drop on the back of continuous negative close that we've seen in Guinness. So generally going into today, I think what we'll see, not so much deviation is expected. Losses seen in the banks in previous week, like I mentioned, provided good entry point for investors, like we had mentioned previously, and we expect some cherry picking to continue in that sector today and tomorrow. Macroeconomic indicators will also be watched closely by both local and foreign investors before making decisions. So we generally will most likely see another quiet day aside process in the market. And like we've always mentioned, savvy investors with medium-term horizon can still come into the market now for some of the names that are beating down, some in the banking sector, as well as some in the industrial sector. Thank you very much. That'll be it for the equities market.
Thank you, Sean. Next, we'll hear from Omorigi, our fixed income trader. Good morning, Omorigi.
Good morning, Joshua. Good morning, everybody. So I'll start with the money market. The money market is still very liquid. So yesterday, supported by coupon inflows of about 20 billion, the money market opened around 13.5 billion positive. A slight improvement from the system opening figures that were recorded on Monday, which was 9 billion positive. So as expected, money market really losing to trade between 11% to 12% from around the 14% levels recorded on Monday. So our expectation for today is that the money market will trade at similar levels, with players likely to turn to the CBN window for liquidity if necessary. Moving on to the FS market. So despite the marginal increase in R&E turnover recorded yesterday, we saw the depreciation of the Naira across the official windows, while the parallel market remains stable to trade at 482 Naira to $1. The R&E window traded at a high of 436.81 Naira to $1, closing at 411 Naira to $1. So as earlier said, the R&E turnover increased marginally to $53.53 million from the $45.35 million recorded on Monday. So our outlook remains the same. The Naira will continue to hover around these levels. So moving on to the TBs market. The TBs market traded on a very active note yesterday. The NTBs were the most traded as more sellers look to offload their positions ahead of the expected rate increase at today's auction. So we saw the one-year paper trade at below 8% levels, precisely at 7.77% during the early hours of yesterday's trading session. However, as the trading session progressed, we saw offers improve to around 8.3% levels, while the bids also settled around 8.7% levels. In the OMO segment, we saw offers across the OMO curve, with the September papers being the most sorted papers yesterday. So there's an NTB auction today. So the DMO is offering 69.51 billion, the same amount that is maturing tomorrow rather, across the three tenors. So the 91 days, we have 15.91 billion as the total amount offered on that end, while the 182 days, the amount offered on that end is 4.5 billion, while the 364 days, the amount offered is 49 billion. So our rate projection for the 91 days remain the same. We expect rate to maintain at this end to close around 2%, while for 182 days, our rate projection also is that rate will maintain to close around 3.5%. For the 364 days, we expect the stop rate to fall between 8% to 9%, given that the secondary market is already trading at above 8%. So some trades where we saw some offers at around 8.3 levels yesterday, while the bids on that end was about 8.7. So we believe that people will factor in all the sentiment while submitting their bid today. And given that the DMO has been borrowing more than they intend to borrow as previous auctions, So if that is going to play out today, we believe that they are going to increase the marginal rate just to accommodate more volume. So our expectation for today is that the T-bills market will trade on a very quiet note as market participants wait on the NTB auction results. I'll conclude with the bonds market. Today, we continue to see sell-off across the benchmark curve in the light of rate advance at the NTB auction today. We also saw in around 13.5, that's around 30.7% levels yesterday. So we expect the bonds market to trade on a very quiet note today with the NTB auction taking center stage. That'll be all for fixed income. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amor, again. Next, we'll hear from our partners at Frontier Africa Reports. I'm Temple Asaji. Good morning, Temple.
Good morning. Good morning, Joshua. Good morning, everyone. Taking off from Southern African markets, Eskom, we all know, has been in some challenges in recent times. They are now looking to raise some 2 billion rands through the sale of some of their non-core assets or properties. They announced yesterday that they've sold some of their assets, 2 high-rise buildings in Johannesburg and one other part of the country, and that is basically to help them settle some of the debt issues that they have on ground. Their annual total debt basically is around 460 billion rand, and the annual debt servicing costs of around 30 billion rands. That's what they've been implementing in recent times. But total disposal to date, we understand, is around 600 million rands. So they continue to sell some of these assets to be able to make up for the cost of the debt burden that they have on their neck at the moment. In the northern part of Africa, you've got Egypt's FDI. Their FDI inflows slid by 32.3% year on year to $3.4 billion in the first half of 2020-2021 fiscal year. And then you've got Atijariwaya Bank rather, saying listed companies in Morocco are expected to grow their turnover by 5% in 2021 and by 4% in 2022. That's basically based on some projections generally. In the western part of Africa, the Central Bank of Western African States injected some over 3 billion CFA franc in liquidity into the West African Economic and Monetary Union markets. That's the BCEAO bank. You have a couple of inflation stories, one from Senegal. Senegal's inflation records increased by 1.2% in the month of March. And of course, in Tanzania, which is under the East African market, they also have their inflation data released. On their part, that fell by some 3.2%. That's in March. It fell by 3.2% compared to 3.3% in February 2021. Rwanda has got its weekly coffee export revenues declining by over 672%. We're yet to find out why. And in Kenya, we understand that Airtel is looking to open 30% capital to national private investors. That's something that will help eventually to boost their mobile money investments that they've been carrying out or that they've been investing in. We know that recently MasterCard and one other major institution in Africa invested over $300 million in the Airtel mobile money business. So now that they're opening up 30% to capital of the capital, so some national private investors, it's something that investors, we understand by analysts, are really, really interested in, but we're yet to know what the details are. Thank you for listening to our headlines from Frontier Africa Reports this morning.
Thank you very much, Temple. We've now come to the Q&A portion. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment in the Q&A or the chat box, or if you prefer to speak, you can raise a hand and you'll be allowed to speak. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can drop a comment and we will answer your question. All right, before we end, somebody has a question about how to get recordings of these meetings. If you would like to have these meetings and the recordings, you can send a message to sales@vetiva.com and they'll happily send you a copy of the recorded meetings. If there are no more questions, we have now reached the end of today's meeting. Thank you once again for joining us. We hope that you join us again tomorrow. Same time, same place. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.